Hi, I'm Lonnie Good, and this is the story about the airplane crash that I survived. And I can't tell my story without telling my dad's story. My dad, William Samuel Good, he died in a search and rescue mission he was flying with Civil Air Patrol back in 1964. And it was on Father's Day that he was going to come over, and I had chosen a chocolate cake out of the bakery truck that came around the old family farm that weekend, and I had chosen it for him, and he was going to come over on Father's Day and share some chocolate cake with me. But it wasn't my dad, but it was my grandfather who showed up on Father's Day, and he came bursting through our door, and he grabbed my mom, and they were standing over there weeping, and I was 6 years old. I didn't understand what was going on, but he came over to me and he said, "Son, your dad's not coming home." And several days after that, I went with my mom and my sisters to Limley's mortuary, and they gave me a little stool to stand on, and I got up on there and I reached into my dad's casket and I touched his hands, and I could see the scars, all the trauma that he had suffered. Even though there was makeup on his body to try to make him presentable, it was obvious the scars going up on his face and his throat and on his hands. But it was after that I developed this horrible fear of death. I remember growing up with it. I was 6 when he died, and it seems like all my life I had this horrible fear that I was going to die in a plane crash the same way he did when I was the same age he was. He was 28 when he died. Fast forward to a time in my life that I was down in Waco, Texas, with a little missionary organization called Wings for Christ, and we were doing a mission down in Mexico. We fixed up an old pickup truck and we were going to give to a missionary who worked with people up in the hills. And our part of that mission was to drive the truck down to Mexico, and then a team was going to fly down and pick us up and leave a team that was going to take that truck to the pastor up in the mountains, and then would fly us back home. And so all went according to plan. We were down at Del Norte Airport in Mexico. We delivered the truck to the airport. The team got there with the husband and wife that was going to take the truck up to the pastor. And they took off, and we started loading up. There were 5 of us, the pilot and co-pilot, and 3 guys. And we started loading up in that Cessna 320. And we flipped a coin to see who was going to get the back passenger area. And I guess I lost the toss because I crawled in that very aft compartment and got buckled up. And I gave that seatbelt an extra tug. And I can't describe how much fear was coming to the surface. Not just that day, but prior to the trip, because these, I'm not going to say voices because I never heard voices, but this fear that I was going to die when I was the same age Dad was. And so before I headed down to Mexico, I was 28. On the day that we flew back was my birthday. I was 29, so this is the last day of my life that this fear could come to fruition. And so, but prior to that, I had prayed, and I told God that I didn't want to die in a plane crash. I wanted to be here for my kids and my grandkids. So I really placed my life in His hands. And here I was in an airplane in Mexico on my birthday, and we went to the end of the runway, and we started down the runway, and our first attempt at a takeoff, we veered off the runway to the right, and nobody said a word. And the pilot taxied back to the end of the runway and tried again, and we veered off the runway again. And then he radioed the tower and asked for the longer runway at Del Norte. And the guy up at the tower asked him if everything was okay, and he said, yeah, we're okay. We just need a longer runway. So he gave him access to the longer runway, and we taxied over there, and we started heading down that runway. And this time I could feel him using toe brakes to keep us centered in the runway. I guess maybe they thought once we got in the air, we could just trim it out. I think they had a little bit of get-home-itis, which men fall prey to that at times. But this time we actually got airborne and we were flying. We were heading out. And we were almost clear of Del Norte Airport, and the stall warning horn came on. And I could see the pilot and co-pilot trying to correct for pitch and stuff and get the stall warning horn to go off, and they accomplished that, and then it came on again. And again, I could see them struggling with the yoke, and they got it pitched over a little bit, and it went off, and then it came on again, but this time it came on. I mean, it was solid. Instead of just it was and the aircraft stalled. This was a full power on stall, so full fuel, full load, full throttle. It was a pretty radical stall. The aircraft broke to the left, and we were literally falling out of the sky. And I looked through a little portal window to my left, and I could see the ground rushing up. And I remember whispering under my breath, "Father, protect us." And that's all I had time to say. In between the time that we hit the ground, we hit an old abandoned DC-3. And we hit it in between the fuselage and the right wing, and it changed our trajectory. So instead of just slicing down through the air and doing a cartwheel, which the aircraft would have been completely annihilated, we all would have died, hitting that old DC-3 changed our trajectory, and we started doing like a flat spin into the ground. But when we hit that DC-3, somewhere in that time frame, for me, time stopped. And when I say time stopped, I mean I stepped out of this thing that we're in that we call time. And it could have been a minute, it could have been an hour, it could have been an eternity. It didn't matter. I was in a place where it wasn't there. And the place that I was, I had an understanding of everything that was going on around me, and I was behind these black creatures. And I don't know if I should call them angels or fallen angels or demons. All I know is I was allowed to see their backside. Now, sometimes I've thought I didn't have to look at their front side. Maybe it was so hideous, but they looked like charred wood. And the understanding that was being given to me, we were in a place where they come and they argue their case against humanity. And though I did not hear their words, I can surmise what that argument would have sounded like. And it was probably something to the effect of, well, God, you being a just God and totally righteous, you knowing that this young man has believed us, has listened to us all of his life, you need to allow us to take him out. And you can keep his spirit, but we're going to take him out. His children are going to grow up fatherless, just like his dad. That was the understanding of what was going on. And while I surmise that, I can also surmise the other side of the argument, knowing that Christ is our advocate. I can see him saying, well, Father, this may have been true at one point in time, but for the last few years, he's been asking you to ensure that he does not die in a plane crash like his dad did. I didn't hear their voices, but I heard God's voice in a response to their pleas to take us out. I heard God say no. It was a lot bigger no than mine. So thank God for his no's. And then I was back in the aircraft, and I unbuckled that seatbelt that I had just tightened up a moment before, and I crawled out of the wreckage, and one of the other missionaries regained consciousness, and so together we started removing the pilot and the co-pilot and the other passenger. We drug the pilot off to the side. I looked over at one point in time and he was vomiting, so I went over and rolled him over on his side real quick. Once they were all loaded up, and I didn't remember what had just transpired, they were all loaded up and they'd gone to hospitals And I was alone at the crash site. I didn't look like I'd gone through an airplane crash. And I had a camera and I was taking pictures of the wreckage. And I was taking pictures of the DC-3 that we hit. And all of a sudden, I had this grin on my face, and I called it a permagrin because it was stuck on my face. And I'll share a picture with you. You'll see that when the aid unit was still there, they were talking to me, and I had that grin on my face. But now everybody was gone. It was just me. And I was walking to the crash site with this crazy grin, and I started asking myself, Lonnie, what are you smiling for? You just went through a horrendous aircraft crash. And it was then that it all came back. I remembered what had just transpired, and I remembered where I was, and I remembered the presence of God, and all of a sudden the presence of God was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And I could feel him around me. I tell people it felt like I was in this huge God bubble, and I knew that it was the God that parted the Red Seas when the children of Israel walked through. I knew it was the God that had saved Daniel when they threw him into the lion's den. I knew it was God who was with David when he slew Goliath. It was God, and he was there, and he was big. I was overwhelmed with the sense of God's presence. I've never forgotten it, and I will never forget it. And I share this story, and there's more to the story. I'd love to share the whole thing, but I want to keep this fairly short. But I share this story because we, as people, we believe certain things, or we'll listen to certain things, entertain ideas and thoughts come into our mind, and we need to realize that there truly is things going on behind the scenes, outside of our vision. And I just want to say, be careful of the voices you listen to, especially the ones that are saying, you're no good, you're worthless, I'm going to take you out, you're going to die. I say, just pray to God against those things, because I know that God, the same God who saved me, will save you. Yeah, that's my story.